Perfect. Yep. You guys are all set. All right, and here you go.
Thank you, Tone. Hey, everybody give Tone a round of applause. His team has been working their butts off this whole time to make sure we're having a good time. So thank you to you and Mike and everybody. So appreciate everyone being here. So today we're going to be talking about Bitcoin mining. Is there any miners in the crowd here? Anyone ever mined a Bitcoin? There's a few. All right, cool. Probably some more back there, but they're having a beer. That's fine. So first, before we dive into the topic, I think we should give a quick high level on it, and I'll let you guys do that because these guys are the experts here, and I'm here to poke some questions. So we'll start at the very end there with Jan. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Slush Pool and Brains.
Hi guys, my name is Jan Čapek. I'm one of the CEOs of the company called Brains, who's been operating and developing the world's first Bitcoin mining pool, also known as Slush Pool. Outside of this, we've been trying to fight the software pirates from China by starting an open source initiative called BrainsOS, which provides the users with an alternative firmware that is completely open source and free. So that's about it. So this is our mining part.
Awesome. Nick?
Yeah, my name is Nick. I'm the founder of BlockForge. We're the distribution company for Canon, one of the top 3 mining ASIC manufacturers in the world. We handle North and South America, as well as some other countries that, and some customers that have issues with some of the other manufacturers. It's a very political game they play, so that's our thing. And we also do the support repair for all the Canon machines.
Yeah, that's a big one. Full disclosure here, Ramek is actually my business partner on a mining operation. He'll tell you about it, but I'm not wearing my Pluton hat today. I'm neutral, so if anything, I'll have to give him a harder time.
Thank you. My name is Ramek. I'm the founder of Pluton Group. We're structuring a securities offering to build North America's largest solar-powered Bitcoin mining in California, Kern County. My background is real estate, and I built one of the 3 nationwide criminal databases in the mid-90s, which I sold 4 years ago.
Okay, great. And Adam Back, I think we've seen you a few times today, on and off. Your best friends now are all looking at you. A small startup called Blockstream.
Yeah, so Blockstream does a lot of different things. We're involved in different parts of the Bitcoin stack, from a Bitcoin wallet called Green, Block Explorer, Layer 2 Lightning, another Layer 2 Liquid, which is about exchange transactions. But we're also doing mining. So we made an announcement about our mining participation last year, which we'd actually been doing for a while at that point. And so we have a mining data center in Canada and another one in the US, in Georgia. So yeah, we're doing mining for ourselves and also for customers, providing hosting for other customers.
And one of the coolest things that he didn't touch on is they have a network of satellites that cover most of the planet, so you can run the Bitcoin network via satellite and not rely on the big telecoms. That's really cool. I think more people should be doing that. Okay, great. So, and of course I was joking about a small startup. Blockstream is a very big and influential company in the industry. So, all right, so mining, picks and shovels, digging up dirt. You crack open a diamond and Bitcoin's inside there. Is that how it works, guys? Roughly? No? Okay. So I want somebody, whoever wants to go first, but mining, essentially putting electricity and hardware together to solve cryptographic hash puzzles and earn the game theory incentive, which is Bitcoin. Does somebody want to get a little bit more technical and explain how it works and why we're all here doing it, aside from the obvious incentive? Jan?
I'll take a go.
Take it? Okay.
So,
As the author.
I guess, yeah. So, I mean, mining is fulfilling a couple of functions. One of the main ones is to allow people to acquire new Bitcoins. It's the way that Bitcoins come into existence. So every 10 minutes, another block is released. The secondary function of mining is to finalize transactions. So to make a chain of previous transactions and make new transactions be processed and become final over time. And what mining is some kind of sort of distributed lottery. Each person runs a mining machine. The more mining machines you have, the higher portion of the hash rate you have, the more probability you have to find the next block. But it's an even playing field, you know. So if you have one miner and your friend has two, he's twice as likely, but no more than twice as likely is the plan. So it's important that it be fair, and the randomness helps make it fair. So that's a kind of simplified way to look at it. And the mining process itself is basically some kind of randomized thing where you're doing the equivalent of throwing a lot of coins. So like if you think about throwing 20 coins, you're waiting for them all to land tails, and then you can claim a block. Except in Bitcoin, the hash rate is very high, so it's actually something like 72, 73 coins, which is an enormous amount of tries per second for that to result in that many heads or tails in that time period.
Okay, great. And Jan, you had your own version? You still want to do that?
It's very precise, but usually what I like to say as an example when you want to think about mining, it's sort of like when you're rolling a dice that has, 1 million sides. And your task is to roll the dice as long as you hit a number that is smaller than certain thing. So that's your task. Once you find it, you're lucky, and then you can submit the block.
Okay. All right, thank you. Nobody else? You guys good on the mining? Yeah, a couple of them? Okay. All right, so the title of the panel is the halving, right? So the halving right now, the rewards are what, 12.5? That's what we're at, 12.5 Bitcoin is the incentive. That gets reduced by half every 4 years, and next is 6.25 and so on. So explain to me why Satoshi included, in your opinion, the halving and why it's good for the incentive model and creating scarcity long term.
I think the reason why is so that it would have a limited supply to kind of simulate gold mining. So think about history of gold mining. Originally, it was possible to panhandle, like to take gold from the surface. And then when that was used up, people had to do more industrial work. So they had to work harder to find the next amount of gold. And at this point, it's become like extremely industrial. There are mines that are miles deep and things like that. So I think by reducing the amount over time, it simulates it getting harder to mine over time. And in Bitcoin's case, it means there is a defined maximum because it kind of asymptotically approaches the maximum, which is the famous 21 million coins. So that's why it halves, and it does this every 4 years, and so then there are all the questions about what happens economically when it happens.
Of course, and there's a stat that I heard recently that kind of puts it in perspective. There's more than 21 millionaires on the planet, so not even every millionaire on the planet can own one Bitcoin. So that's just one small portion of the larger population. So that just shows you how once, a little bit more of a small percentage of the world gets into Bitcoin, it's going to exponentially grow and become more scarce.
I actually think, and we're talking about this earlier, I actually think it's a great thing. Satoshi, you could foresee the Moore's law take effect, and I think the halving, whatever we call it, is actually a great thing. It forces the miners to be ready. Those who are not running an efficient operation will shut down, or in this case, I suspect they're going to start attacking shitcoins, Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV with those S9s they have. We've seen a couple of attacks there. But I think it's good for the industry. You can't just run excessively with 10 cents kilowatt hour prices. Even the price of Bitcoin goes up. You have to be efficient. And this is a preventive measure. As the miners, the equipment, the ASICs get so much more efficient, the block reduction is a defensive mechanism.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, my background's in materials science, so when I'm looking at it from a semiconductor manufacturing perspective, I think it's amazing to put the pressure on the manufacturers to be more and more efficient in creating that demand, because no other industry has been able to do it as fast as this industry has. where I think we took 2 decades of advancement and squeezed it into a 7-year period when Bitcoin kind of first started. And since then, I don't know, it's, you know, exponentially growing from then, and that's where, you know, you started with laptop and now you're leap forward over graphics card to ASIC miners. Next will be probably some sort of quantum mining to some degree. So I think it's amazing just because it pushes the technology for every industry forward by pushing the semiconductor manufacturing forward. And we surpassed Moore's Law years ago, not just because of that, but I'd like to think that Bitcoin pushed that forward a little bit. So yeah, Nick, your thoughts on the halving?
Yeah, it is necessary because, like, for example, this is the first halving in history. I think that more used equipment's going to all become irrelevant in the same month, which is going to make the summer pretty interesting in what happens to 4-5 million S9s that are going to be floating around that are getting bought up right now for the cheapest price in history. I mean, a couple bucks a terahash. Someone can take this used equipment and definitely attack one of the other smaller networks, which is interesting. And this halving is going to be a little bit different than the last one, I think. So, pretty excited to see what happens.
One interesting aspect of the whole halving is that we're at a point where, like Nick said, we're about to exchange the mining hardware on a major scale. However, there are news, and I mean, you guys probably have more inside information, because we are, as a pool, pretty much like a little bit further away from the physical hardware, even though we play with it, where the miners who decided to make some major investment into the equipment are not so sure that they really want to pull it off, because they don't know what's going to happen with the price after the halving. If it stays the same, then they're pretty much out of business, or most of them who don't have cheap enough electricity. So May 2020, or when it's going to happen, is definitely going to be the most interesting halving, I think, in Bitcoin's history.
Yeah, I mean, you know, historically in the previous halvings, the prices increased like before or after or something like that. And so, in principle, if the Bitcoin price more than doubles every 4 years, it could be even, right? But because at this point the hash rate has increased so much, you know, so the context is that Bitcoin price has reached a low of around $3,200 not so long ago, and now it's like 9,500 to 10,000. So it's already more than twice as much as it was. So you could say, well, you know, going after the halving would be no different than the price being 5,000, which it was not very long ago, right? But the problem is the hash rate has increased since then, and people have put like more efficient equipment online. So it seems to be the case at this point that something would have to give post-halving.
Well, how much of those old equipment do you think they're going to capitulate? They're going to move away from Bitcoin. I think there's still a lot of S9s left there. Then they're running at some decent price per, for kilowatt hour. What do you think they're going to do after the halving? Are they going to switch back to Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV?
I mean, I think not everybody, some people switch coins dynamically based on what's most profitable, and other people just, mine Bitcoin and that's all they do. So, but the portion of people that will switch dynamically mean that the approximate profitability of mining it's the same. So the hash rate on the coins is related to the value of the reward in a fairly direct way. I mean, apart from during the hash wars when people were doing uneconomic things, surprisingly, generally speaking, it just follows the price and the value of the reward. So I'm not sure. I mean, it seems, we should get a preview actually, because some of those forks have a halving first. So it'll be interesting to see what happens because their halving is first. Their
I think Bitcoin Cash is a month ahead of Bitcoin.
Right. So its relative security compared to Bitcoin will halve at that point, and it's already 2 or 3% or something like that, quite low.
I actually think that's going to be the most interesting aspect of the halving coming up, is the Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV are a month ahead. Are people really going to put the S9s out of commission, or they're going to try to attack those networks and maybe do some double spending?
Yeah, because that's a first, right? We haven't had those forks that are happening earlier, at least not that much earlier, right? as far as I know.
It's the first halving on Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV. That's for sure.
Right. Sure. Okay. So you mentioned the increasing difficulty. Well, you started talking about gold and how it used to be top layer, and now you have to blast and go pretty deep to find a good amount of pay dirt, if you will. So same with Bitcoin, right? As it increases, the difficulty goes up. You need more electricity and better hardware, better chips, more capacity, hard money, if you will, right? So that leads me to a question for you, Ramek, because your project, your brainchild uses mostly renewable, right? So focusing on renewable energy, whether it's solar, hydro, natural gas, whatever it is, geothermal. Why is that important for longevity for Bitcoin?
Our project is a result of my personal experiences. I was one of the people who bought miners from Gigawatt, but my experience end result was a bit different. I made out of that deal with a very nice profit flipping those miners. I think ultimately mining and the operation, they have to control the production of electricity during peak hours of electricity. That's the only way you can control your pricing and your operation over 20 to 25 years. And that's where, Pluton Mining, we're trying to structure it. It's 50 acres of land in Kern County, and the main reason to use solar panels is renewable, but it's the only source, cost-effective way that we can produce electricity during the peak hours of electricity is roughly 60 cents per kilowatt hour installed. That's 2/10 of a penny over the 25 years per kilowatt hour. So there's a guarantee on it. So we have to move to renewables. I think there are reports that 70% of the industry is renewable. Blockstream has the Quebec Hydro. It's all hydro, but they can tell you, as everybody else has seen, when you go try long-term basis, as the halving coming, as the miners are getting more efficient, you've got to start structuring. And our project is for the real estate investor who doesn't have exposure to Bitcoin. They want real estate and they want a 20-year project. It's all about pricing of the kilowatt hour and the long-term effect that you're going to have on the project and on the grid.
Got it. Does anybody else, guys at the end, have any experience in with renewables or any thoughts on that?
A couple of years ago, we've been asked by a company who had direct access to a power plant, which normally, sometimes the power plants, they have excess power that they just pretty much need to earth, because that's the cheapest way that they can get rid of it, because nobody wants to sell it at some hours. And
So
they were
just grounding it?
Yeah, they're just grounding it, which might sound like irrational, but we did the calculation for them, considering the current cost of equipment at that time, which was, I don't know, $1,500 per NS9, and it turned out that the amount of time that they were willing to, or that they were in the position of having this for free electricity, would never pay off for the investment into the equipment. So maybe now we're in a situation with the new halving and with the mining hardware being replaced, that we would have a lot of excess hardware that has pretty much like zero cost, that could be theoretically usable for using this peak hours of power plants that they just can't sell and consume that electricity. But it's a theory. But at that time, the whole calculation didn't make any economical sense.
Yeah, I mean, we also looked at a kind of zero cost of power, but with a duty cycle situation in a small scale. And if you're talking about new equipment, it has the problem that you're only running it part of the time. Now, there are people with 24/7 because they have grid connections and solar. So that's a different story. But if you have something that only has intermittent power, it can be more profitable to pay for the power to have it 24/7, particularly in the first year of the miner's operation, because that's when you make most of the profit.
I know one renewable energy trend that a lot of our customers are doing is a natural gas byproduct, especially in Texas. A lot of them natural gas producers, when they tap the ground, they have an excess that they have to pay someone to take out of the well. So what they're doing, there's a handful of people that are brokering these equipment and container setups, and they'll come land the containers on the property, therefore converting the extra natural gas into power and consuming it on the property. So when the well's tapped out, they'll move it to the next one, so on and so forth. There's probably about 20 or 25 people in Texas floating around doing that, and that's one of the coolest byproduct we've seen of the renewable, because it's literally, they're having to pay people to take it. So now they're getting paid at least something, if not breaking even, for what they had to expend on the equipment to convert the natural gas to power.
Got it. Okay. So I'm going to touch on another topic, and then I think if we want to keep going, we can, but we can also open it up to the audience for questions. So I briefly mentioned quantum earlier, and I want to talk about that on a couple levels. Obviously, on the manufacturing scale, you know, to put it in perspective, over 10 years ago when I was in grad school, we were printing, you know, atomic dots for soldering, right? So if you could move single atoms in an array to position them how you want to, that's very, very small 3D printing. So you can do that at 2D, but you can also do it 3D. So I think quantum is going to come quicker than we think, not to the degree where it's going to completely unravel any network, but to some degree, if we can use any of that parallel information, if you will, to manipulate the probabilities and give us our best guess, just like we do with electrons. We've created all the electricity grids on the planet with a theoretical particle called the electron, right? So if we can do the same thing with quarks, leptons, or anti-leptons, anti-quarks, and so on, to any degree, I think we're going to have a lot more access to information that we can use to mine Bitcoin or do a lot of other things. So what are your thoughts on quantum? I know that Google just announced, I think it was Google, that quantum supremacy a few months back. Andreas did a video about it saying that, you know, it's only in the 100 qubit range and we need thousands of qubits to even affect the network that is Bitcoin. So Adam, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between logical qubits and physical qubits because you have to error correct them in practice. So I think the number that, you know, I'm not a quantum physics expert, but people who have expertise in the cryptography and the physics have said that you would need between 1 million and 3 million qubits. So, you know, we're very far away from that necessarily being practical. And for mining, I think an observation I made is a little different, which is that with Bitcoin mining, it's a decentralized system, and the advantage that quantum gets is from the entangled system. So you would have to build a big enough quantum supercomputer for it to have a meaningful advantage. And Bitcoin needs to be decentralized, not, you know, one supercomputer. So if it's not a very big quantum computer and it doesn't have many bits, it will tend to get, you know, overtaken by classical computers because they're already very fast and very dense. So I think it's a long way off. You know, people also talk about quantum computer attacks on the digital signature algorithms that Bitcoin uses. I think that's also very far away. And actually, hash functions are more resilient to quantum computing than discrete log signatures. So I think mining is actually more protected or insulated from quantum advances than digital signatures.
Jan, I think you had an input.
Adam already covered it, so I was just gonna say basically the physical hashing that's happening in order to find new bitcoins as a sequential algorithm where every stage of the SHA function depends on the data computed in the previous step. So you technically cannot use the quantum computer to an advantage to run something in parallel to magically, you know, test out more hashes than the equipment that we have right now. But it can be used for factorization, and that affects the crypto behind Bitcoin. But that's a completely different story. And hopefully by the time, which I think it's not going to happen in our lifetime, but if by the time the quantum computing is mature enough, we would have a post-quantum cryptography ready, or there's research going on in that area.
With the quantum computing, I think he's accurate. It's out of our lifetime. I know some of the, like there's global foundries, and I think SBI is also trying to work on the next step of the ASIC, which is more of a approximation computing. It's more guessing. Jan probably knows more than I do, but instead of working from the beginning to the end, you're kind of taking guesses, and the SHA-256 is more tolerant to errors. And I know that's supposed to take maybe a 20-30% gain in the chips from where they're going on now. So with global foundries and a handful of the other suppliers, I know they're trying to get that to get a little bit of an edge. Some of the foundries did harvest some of the engineers from some of the big mining companies to try to develop their own chips. Whether that comes out or not, I think the quantum thing's so far out, but I think the approximate computing is a little bit of a closer thing.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add other than quantum is at least 10, 12 years out before even reaching anywhere. What Google showed was nothing short of a press release and marketing tool.
Marketing stunt.
Well, yeah, I mean, particularly the Supremacy is artificial. Like it's Supremacy at doing something, at simulating itself, which is kind of obvious, right? A box of sand simulates itself faster than a supercomputer to simulate all the particles. So it's a very artificial claim, I think.
Sure. Yeah. So we're a ways off, but definitely interesting. All right, guys. I think I'm going to open it up to the audience for a couple of questions here.
Actually, I have one question
Okay.
for the gentleman to my right. When do we see 5 and 3 nanometers machines?
5 nanometer, I know. 3 nanometer, I have no clue. 7 nanometer is only running about 60% efficiency, I know, with Bitmain. Canon hasn't even launched the 7 yet. They're still running the 16 nanometer, squeezing a little more out of that every year with a different heat sink design that's pressure loaded onto the chips, and it does help switching the position of them vertically instead of horizontally. 5 nanometer, I know Taiwan Semiconductor is playing with it, and Bitmain might announce that they use it. It's kind of irrelevant at this point because all the cell phones, the new PlayStations, it's all 7. They're not going to fire up a line just for crypto. Honestly, Taiwan, TSMC could care less. It's a small portion of theirs. They're not going to fire up another fab line. That's a huge ordeal to start another fab line for a chip. I mean, we're in Arizona, a couple blocks away from Intel, and we see when they build out another fab line, it's news, it's groundbreaking. It's not like they just throw some more assembly guys in the corner. So,
Right. They want to know they can ship millions of units with this new chip, right? Jan?
One thing about the 7 nanometers, probably last year I talked to quite a few companies who were super confident in pulling off a 7 nanometer design. We now have 7 nanometer chips and the hash units, but the problem is that nobody really knows like what the real manufacturing cost and what the yields are. There was a big technological shift in 7 nanometers, I think during end of 2019, where I think it was TSMC or maybe all the big foundries, they finally got the EUV, which is the extra ultraviolet technology. Essentially what that means is currently when you produce the chips, you're using a light, but it is not light, it's some ultra short length something. And before this EUV, they were using like 100 nanometer light wavelength in order to produce chips that had structures of like 10 nanometers. And in order to do that, they had to do quite a few optical tricks. So it was essentially a big cheat on the nature, but they were able to do it. The cost that you pay for it is that you have to undergo a manufacturing process that has so many steps that the probability that you're going to produce faulty wafers or the areas of the wafers are not going to be functional is pretty high. So the EUV is a big change in the technology where these 7 nanometer chips do not require as many production steps because the wavelength is reduced by a factor, I think, like 5 or something. It's not 7 nanometers. It's still more than that. The length of the stream, of the particles. So this is the major change, but still we don't know what the real cost to manufacture and to have like a sustainable manufacturing process of machines. So I still believe, like for example, what Canon is doing, if they're conservative and they're staying with the 16 nanometers and trying to optimize the design, I think this is the area where it's like it's safe to be at.
Got it. Okay. All right. So, audience, anybody have any questions for panelists here related to mining or quantum or any of the other topics we've talked about? Gentleman in the hat, how you doing, sir? I don't think the microphone's on. If you want, you can come up here and we'll just hand you one of these. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, guys, for the panel. My question, I have two quick questions. First one is, does anybody know if there's like a prediction market for what the difficulty is going to be, let's say 3 months after the halving? And the second is, if people know what the current distribution of S9s versus other equipment is right now?
Right now, the approximation is like 4.5 to 5.2 million S9s floating around. So multiply that by 13 to 14 terahash. That's how much stuff's going to be used. As far as the difficulty, it's all on the price of Bitcoin, and that's the one thing out of control of every miner. I know the name of the panel was what are they going to do for the halving? Honestly, they don't know. Most people are kind of playing it by ear. They have massive investments. They have their own agenda to create. There's other coins that have their own agendas, and they're gonna run as much hash rate as they can, no matter what. But they're also gonna be able to buy it very, very, very cheap very soon. As far as the new manufacturers, the virus obviously had a big impact on the halving also, because there hasn't been any production. They're barely getting skeleton crews back to work next week, so nothing's even gonna be shipping for another week and a half. So stranded inventory, and plus like you said, the 7 nanometer, it's expensive. Canon stayed with the 16. It's a lot cheaper. They can get a lot more units out, but it's nothing like it was 2 years ago. It's a lot lower.
All right. Thank you. Did you have Jan?
Just, I think you may want to talk to Jack Mallers. I think he had some insights on the difficulty thing.
All right. Maybe he can put you in touch. One more question, and I think we're going to wrap it up so that we can do the next keynote. You, sir, how you doing?
Hi, I'm John. I was wondering what you think of the importance of pool distribution, and why is P2 pool nowhere near as popular as it used to be? Also, I'd like to know what do you think of the difference where the miners have less incentive for the block reward and more incentive for user transactions or user transaction fees?
So distribution of pools, I think one of the factors of there not being that many pools is that you're trying to provide variance reduction. Like if you solo mine and you don't have that much hash rate, you'll get blocks very infrequently. So that's the service the pools are providing. But to provide a reasonable variance reduction, you might ideally need 5% of the hash rate. So the whole network can't really support more than like 20 pools, and some of them are bigger, right? So that's why you see the distribution you see. So it's not ideal, but there's not an easy technical way to overcome that challenge.
Maybe what I would like to mention is that what is maybe more scary than the pool distribution, where we see there's a lot of hash rate coming from China, but it's a little bit changing, is that we're in a position where what is actually centralized is the manufacturing, and that could be a long-term threat, which we may want to think about. We don't have any competing manufacturers outside of China, and we had those unbleed affairs and all these things. So this is the centralization thing really happening in the background. Even though there are multiple players now in the game, which is getting a little better, but still the majority of the devices are the former Bitmain S9. So once this balance of the physical devices that are distributed across the globe changes, then we could feel a little bit safer, I would say.
So we need a at-home MakerBot semiconductor revolution.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the other thing you could say is that there are different stages of the manufacturing process. So we were just talking about the 7 nanometer and the 5 nanometer. So actually, I believe none of that advanced ASIC production is happening in China. What's happening in China is the boards and the power supplies and things, because TSMC, as the name suggests, in Taiwan, Samsung in Korea, right? And the other ones are more global, like Intel has equipment in different countries and so on.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for the question. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate you being here. Transitioning here to Tone. I've got a question, actually, for you guys. And whoever answers first wins a Bitcoin hardware wallet. But it is a cool coin that you can put in your pocket. And it is a cold storage wallet. So who knows the market cap of Bitcoin right now? Well, you're at the mic. You might as well use it.
175 billion.
There you go. I think it was 176, but that's close enough. Thank you. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, come on up. I'm not even sure where I'm supposed